Welcome to the Trail Running Briefing, the podcast for trail runners who want to understand their training and run better. Each week, one clear idea to help you train smarter, stay durable, and perform when it matters. Episode 10: How to train downhill safely without breaking yourself. Why is it that one hard downhill session can leave your quads destroyed for 3 or 4 days? Most runners know the feeling. The climb feels hard, but the descent is what really breaks you. Your legs feel smashed, your stride falls apart, and suddenly the next few sessions are compromised. A lot of runners assume the answer is simple: just run more downhill and you'll adapt. That's partly true, but if you do too much too soon, downhill running becomes less like training and more like control damage. So the real question is, how do you build downhill strength and skill without breaking yourself in the process? The key idea is this: downhill running is not mainly an aerobic or problem. It is an eccentric loading problem. When you run downhill, your muscles, especially the quads, are working while lengthening to control impact and braking. That is very different from flat or uphill running. It places much more mechanical stress on the muscle tendon system, and that is one of the reasons downhill running creates more soreness, more strength loss, and more muscle damage than many runners expect. Reviews and recent studies on downhill running consistently show this pattern, with higher eccentric demand, more muscle damage markers, and temporary reductions in force after downhill bouts. But there is the good news: the body adapts. There is very well known effect in exercise science called the repeated bout effect. In simple terms, one sensible exposure to eccentric stress can make you more resilient to the next one. That means a small controlled dose of downhill running today can reduce soreness and damage from a similar session in the future. This has been shown across eccentric exercise research for years, and more recent downhill running studies support the same principle. So the goal is not to avoid downhill running. The goal is to dose it carefully enough to trigger adaptation without creating so much damage that it ruins the rest of your training week. That is the mental model. Downhill training is like a strength training for runners. Too little and you don't adapt. Too much and you can't recover well enough to keep progressing. And that matters because downhill performance is not just about bravery or technique. It is about your tissues being prepared for repeated braking forces and your nervous system being comfortable controlling speed under fatigue. So, if you want to improve safely, think less in terms of hammer the descents and more in terms of progressive exposure. So what does that look like in real training? First, understand the most common mistake. Runners often treat downhill running like a fitness session when it should first be treated like a conditioning session. They go to the hills, run hard downhill because it feels fast, and then spend the next 2 to 4 days carrying excessive soreness. Research shows that even relatively short downhill bouts can increase soreness and reduce force production for several days. A better approach is to build downhill tolerance in layers. Start with small doses. That means 4 to 6 short downhill reps of 20 to 40 seconds on a moderate slope, done under control, not flat out. Early on, the goal is not speed, the goal is exposure. Let the muscles learn the task. Then progress one variable at a time. Increase either the number of reps or the length of the downhill or the steepness, but not all three together. Another mistake is doing downhill work when the legs are already destroyed from heavy strength training, a race, or a massive long run. Downhill work is highly stressful mechanically, so it needs respect. Place it on a day when you are reasonably fresh, especially in the early stages. Technique matters too, but keep it simple. On technical or steep descent, runners often overstride and brake too hard in front of the body. That usually increases impact and make the quads work even harder. A better cue is shorter steps, quick feet, a slight forward lean from the ankles, and let the heel come to you. No reckless, no defensive, controlled. Strength training can help a lot here, especially eccentric focus work. Split squats, step downs, reverse lunges, and control squat variation can prepare the quads and connective tissues for the braking demands of descending. And importantly, eccentric training does not need to be huge in volume to work. Even low frequency eccentric work can improve neuromuscular function when applied consistently. A practical progression could look like this. Week 1-2, short control descent, low volume. Week 3-4, slightly longer reps or one extra rep. Week 5 onward, add race specific descent, technical terrain or downhill running later in long runs. That last part is important. Once basic tolerance is built, you can make it more specific by practicing descent when slightly fatigued, because that is what happens in races. But do that only after you've earned the right through gradual build up. And one more rule. If one downhill session damages the next 3 sessions, the dose was far too high. That is not productive specificity. That is just poor load management. Here's the takeaway. Train downhill like strength work, not like free speed. Respect the damage, build the skill, progress the dose. A good rule of thumb is this. Finish your downhill session feeling like you could have done a bit more. That's usually the right dose for adaptation. Because with downhill running, the goal is not to prove you are tough today. It's become durable enough to descend well on race day. That's today's trail running briefing. Understand your training, apply it on the trail, and run better.